has grown from a small trading town in the heartland of Bangladesh to one of the busiest cities in the world. Every day, over 7 million people get out of their homes and take part in the massive economic cycle running throughout the city. The youths are also adapting to this economic development and becoming more efficient and competent. Though this intense drive to succeed is very admirable, we are being sucked into this harsh world. Day by day, we are turning into mere cogs in a machine and missing out on many things, including our history. Bangladesh has a glorious history which stretches far beyond our liberation war. Ancient battles were once fought over this land, and old cities lay as capitals of proud and rich empires. Great forts, palaces, temples, churches, and mosques once stood proud across our country. Their ruins are still here to inspire people today of the greatness of Bengal. However, do any of us visit these relics of the past? Can we honestly say we know the history of our own nation? Sadly, most of us don't. And that is exactly why we have decided to explore these relics in an effort to know more about the place we come from. Our main goal? To connect the youth of our generation to the glorious past of Bangladesh. There are quite a few major historical relics scattered all over Bangladesh, and we shortlisted them according to the 6 divisions. This is the first of a 3-part series covering Dhaka and Rajshahi divisions. Within restraints of time, from Dhaka, we have Asan Manjil, Lalbagh Kella, and Sonargaon, the old capital of Bengal, as well as glimpses of Dhakeshwari Temple and the Star Mosque. From Rajshahi, we have Ramsagar Dihi, Kantaji's temple, a glimpse of the Kusumba Mosque, Bhutia, Paharpur, and Mahastanpur. As you can guess, we will be traveling a lot. So before heading out, we decided to devise our own vehicle for the trip. Something cheap, traditional, and decent that can travel both on land and water. After all, Bangladesh is unpredictable. You never know which place gets flooded when. After much thinking, planning, and pulling our hairs out, we decided to add wheels to a boat.
Board is like it's a giveaway country though. That's why. Oh crap! Damn it! Holy!
about the relationship between the damsel in distress and the documentary? Nothing much really. We just wanted to travel in style. Ahsan Munjil was the residential palace and court of the Nawabs and is an architectural treasure trove. Nawab Abdul Ghani began the construction of the palace in 1859, completing it in 13 years' time, and named it Ahsan Munjil after his son Khaja Ahsanullah. Divided into two main parts, the Rong Mahal on the east and the Andar Mahal on the west, the palace is a witness to many historical events of Bangladesh. From being the trading center of the French to holding many anti-Congress meetings, it also saw the emergence of the All India Muslim League of East Bengal. Famous for its Kumud Koli or buds of lotus-shaped dome, 27.13 meters high, Ahsan Munjil consists of a Hindustani room with a spacious and exquisite Jalshaghar or the singing room. There is also a gigantic Darbar hall and to its north, amazingly, a billiard room. All of these have been transformed into a museum exhibiting the luxurious lives led by the Nawabs. With the decline of the Nawabs of Dhaka, Ahsan Munjil also started to decline, following the East Bengal Estate Acquisition Act in 1952. The act stated that all property of the Nawabs, except residential palaces, will be taken away by the government. From then on, it became impossible for the successors of the Nawabs to maintain the palace due to financial constraints, causing the palace to quickly deteriorate. In 1985, Ahsan Munjil and its surroundings were acquired and renovated by the Bangladesh government, bringing it under the control of the National Museum. By no doubt, the renovation and preservation work was a very good initiative, but painting it pink from its original majestic white color was really very disheartening. With Ahsan Munjil wrapped up, we set off for Lalbagh Killa, which is only an hour boat ride from the Munjil. It's finally time to test the DID on water.
the bank. This is an informing, beautiful and enjoyable scenery. Only problem is, those children enjoying themselves over there might contract diseases because most of our pollution is dumped right here in the Burigaga River.
This famous river once used to touch the southern wall of the Lalbagh Fort in the mid-1800s. Currently, however, it is 1.5 kilometers off, so we still have to travel a short way by road to reach it. Lalbagh Killa, constructed in 1678 AD by Prince Muhammad Azam, is also known as Fort Aurangabad and is located at the southwestern part of Old Dhaka. In case you're wondering who Muhammad Azam is, let's take a look at history. Many years ago, there was this emperor called Zahiruddin Muhammad Babur, who founded this empire called the Mughal Empire. This emperor had kids, lots of them, who had more kids, and those kids had more kids, and eventually came this kid named Aurangzeb, who would soon inherit the empire. He was the ultimate rebel because after growing up, he imprisoned his own father, Shah Jahan, to stop him from building the second Taj Mahal and prevent the empire from going bankrupt. When Aurangzeb was still the king, he sent Prince Muhammad Azam to Dhaka as a chancellor who decided to build a fort. Muhammad Azam was eventually called back to Lahore, the then capital of the empire, leaving the fort unfinished, and Shaista Khan was sent in his place to govern Dhaka. However, in a weird twist of fate, days after Shaista Khan arrived in Dhaka, his daughter Bibi Puri died inside the fort. From then on, Shaista Khan considered the fort ominous and decided not to continue constructions. The fort retained its haunted atmosphere, and many years later, in 1857, during the Sepoy Mutiny, it was the scene of a bloody battle which saw 250 Sepoys stationed inside the fort, all killed by the British forces. It is obvious that if the fort was completed as planned, at least some of those lives might have been saved. After the British Indian Company took over, the fort remained mostly unoccupied until we decided to This is a rough map of Lalbagh Killa. The fort consists of mainly 6 structures: the tomb of Bibi Puri, the Diwani Am, a mosque, the southern fortification wall, the residential area, and the lookout or Porjobekkun Tower. Walking straight from the northern entrance gate, we end up face to face with the tomb of Bibi Puri.
Welcome to the tomb of Bibi Puri. As you can see, this certainly is one of the most impressive structures of the fort.
around a central square room containing the mortal remains of Bibi Puri, covered by a false dome octagonal in shape and wrapped by brass plate. The entire inner wall and floor of the central room is covered with white marble, while the wall in the four-corner rooms is also skirted with recently restored beautifully glazed floral tiles, with only 2 of the original tiles being retained. The southeastern corner room also contains a small grave, popularly known to be of Shamsud Banu, who is believed to be the youngest daughter of Shaista Khan. Bibi Puri was married to Prince Muhammad Azam, and her death caused deep sadness in the prince's mind. It is thought that under his instruction, Bibi Puri's tomb was made the central attraction of the fort. Going east from the mausoleum, following the fountains, we end up in the Diwaniyam, the majestic guest house now currently transformed into a museum, attached with the Hammam Khana or the shower place.
As you can see, the Mughals loved luxury and hygiene. There were 40 fountains and a recently exposed drainage system.
The double-story Diwaniyam is attached with the Hammam Khana on its west and is one gigantic guest house. The complex includes an open platform, a kitchen, water storage area, a brick bathtub, and many other artifacts which are amazing for that age.
So, when was the last time you saw a Golam bathhouse in a fort? Heck, the only cannon lies outside of the bathhouse.
Currently, all these have been transformed into a museum inside the fort.
Moving further east from the Hammam Khana, we end up in the ancient pond. Take a short step to the south from here, and you will reach the fortification wall which houses the entrance to the underground passageway. The lotus-adorned pond ingeniously connects the entire fountain system. Unlike the typical ponds, this one has stairs running down from its 4 corners, giving the pond a more Mughal look to it.
It is fabled that goats will eat almost anything. We're testing our tripod. That place looks more ancient than the Kerala. The house across the street. Yeah. I bet it's big. This is the southern fortification wall. It is the only semblance of proper fortification that the entire 18-acre complex seems to possess, which, even if the fort was incomplete, makes you wonder whether Muhammad Azam expected an immediate attack only from the south, or whether the purpose of this so-called fort was an entirely different one.
It is the underground passageway extended under the Buriganga River towards Khulna as a final mean of self-protection. When the British took over the fort though, the underground passageway was first investigated. Dogs bound with long chains were sent in to see whether the passage was safe and where it leads to. At some point, the dogs stopped moving deeper, and when the chains were pulled back, there were just the empty, intact collars. Apparently, from then on, all the passages were blocked off using dynamite. Till today, that's where the situation stands. The authorities wouldn't open up the gate to the entrance of the underground passageway for us. So we decided to test our Spider-Man skills again and climb over the gate just to take a peek. So, what was inside the underground passageway which ate up the dogs? An oversized mythical python? A fire-breathing lion? Or maybe a medieval dragon which somehow avoided extinction? Guess we'll never find out. The residence area continues on to the lookout tower on the southeast corner of the fort, a little north of which leads to the mosque. The lookout tower does not at all appear to be tall enough for its purpose. Facing the Buriganga River during the time of its construction, it might seem that instead of watching out for enemies, the Mughals only wanted to enjoy the river breeze and the romance of the scenic beauties. The general impression that the fort leaves you with is that it was not, in fact, built as a fort. There are no adequate fortifications, while the observation tower is meant for enjoying the river scenery, and the only symbol of self-protection is the rumored underground secret passageway. As for the heavy protection of the southern wall, it was suggested that its purpose was in fact mainly for preventing soil erosion and as a flood barrier rather than against enemies. The main structures of the fort are a tomb, the shower place, and the guest house, so one may correctly assume that it was meant to be built more like a palace rather than a fort. Our next big destination is the ancient city of Bengal, Sonargaon. But before that, let's take a quick glance at the Dhakeshwari Temple and the Star Mosque, both renovated ancient sites of old Dhaka. The Dhakeshwari Temple, located southwest of Solimullah Hall of Dhaka University, has a pretty clouded origin. Some say it was built in the 12th century by Ballal Shen of the Shen dynasty, before the Sultanate period and much before the Mughal period, whereas some say it was built during the 1800s. During the 1971 Liberation War, most of the structures were destroyed and several of the temple custodians tortured and killed. Back then, this place was used as an ammunition storage area. As you can tell, it has been renovated several times, and in 1996, it was declared as the National Temple of Dhaka. The Star Mosque is situated in Armanitola. It was built by Mirza Golam Pir sometime in the first half of the 19th century. This mosque currently has 5 marble domes and was resurfaced with colorful and delicate tiles of various patterns in 1926. But its most eye-catching feature is the mosaic decoration created from chinaware and pieces of glass. The whole edifice is covered with designs of flowers, branches, crescents, and Arabic calligraphy, with stars being the most dominant decoration. As the domes are also covered with hundreds of blue stars, the mosque has been quite appropriately named the Star Mosque. Sonargaon used to be the administrative center of Eastern Bengal, which survives at Narayanganj district. Literally meaning the Golden Village, it is now a township about 27 kilometers to the southeast of Dhaka. Panam city is an extensive area in Sonargaon, which used to be the Hindu capital. A famous house remains here, named Neelkuthi, which was used for the trading of Muslim cloth and indigo. Ibn Battuta, a famous Moroccan traveler, arrived in Sonargaon in 1346 AD and noted down the place to be an important port city during that period. The historic city of Sonargaon now exists only in name, and the only remains are a few medieval buildings belonging to the Sultanate, Afghan and Mughal periods. Walking through the roads of Sonargaon and behold the dilapidated buildings staring down, it takes you back to this ancient living cabin. What once used to be a magnificent port city is now a place for the homeless.
Even before Muslim occupation, Sonargaon used to be occupied by Hindus since the 6th century, when this place was known as Subarnapuram. It became the Hindu capital in the 13th century, until the 14th century when it was occupied by Muslims.
With the Muslim occupation in 14th century, Sonargaon continued to be the administrative centers till the rise of our beloved Dhaka.
We're now in a place called Panam city, which used to be the Hindu capital in the 13th century. What is amazing about this place are the houses with their intricate corridors, rooms, and shelves, and the architecture here is simply
The elaborate designs and fading architecture of the buildings is truly a marvelous part of our history to cherish.
are so ancient that they date back to the Sultanic period.
The Boro Sardar Bari and its surroundings have been transformed into a commercial tourist spot and also a Lokoshilpo museum portraying the various craftsmanship of our country.
Standing on the battlements of the Shonakanda Fort, which is opposite the Hajiganj Fort on the other side of the river. As Shonagaon was a port city, it is very important for these river forts to protect the routes into and out of the city.
Both the sister Hajiganj Fort and the Shonakanda were built by Mir Jumla to counter the raids made by the Marks and the Portuguese.
Civilization. If you will notice, unlike the Lalbagh Fort, this fort has no structures in it except for this artillery room. Now that's a real fort. If you were wondering what happened to our damsel in distress, we suck.
Although we did manage to get the damsel in distress back home, we agreed to value our lives and not take our unique vehicle to Rajshahi. With the major relics in Dhaka division pretty much wrapped up, it's time to head out to Rajshahi. But before that, it's important to know about how Bangladesh actually came into existence. We're not talking about just our separation from Pakistan, but tracing our history back to before Christ. Bangladesh is what you could call a new state in an ancient land, and many historians describe it as a country challenged by contradictions. In the ancient times, it was an integral part of mighty empires in northern India, and that is exactly how the history unfolds from 700 BC. This is an approximate timeline of Bangladesh's history from 700 BC till our liberation in 1971. 700 BC is the approximate birth year of Mahastangad, the oldest historical site in Bangladesh. During that period, the Bangladesh region was roughly part of four kingdoms: Pundro in the north, Bongo in the south, Rar or Sumo in the east, while the west was part of the great Mogdho Empire. Soon, the entire Bangladesh region was incorporated into this empire under the Nando dynasty, and by 326 BC, Alexander the Great had reached its borders. As history depicts, Alexander's weakened army turned back from the Indus Valley, fearing a massive attack from Gangaridhai and Prasi regions. The Mauryan dynasty followed the Nando dynasty in 322 BC under Chandragupta Maurya, and in 273 BC, Ashoka the Great extended the empire's territory to its maximum, greatly shaping the state of Buddhism in Bangladesh. The Gupta dynasty eventually succeeded the Mauryans in 240 AD, and the time was known as the Golden Age, when science and literature flourished. Trade with the Romans was also initiated, and the port city of Sonargaon is estimated to have been built at this time. The Pal dynasty followed the Golden Age in 750 AD, and in 770 AD, the second king Dharmopal established Paharpur. In 1095 AD, the Shen dynasty, the last independent Hindu dynasty ruling over Bangladesh, took over. Islam made its first appearance in Bengal in 1202, and the Afghan Ibn Bakhtiyar Khilji is lavishly credited for doing so in our famous poet Al-Mahmud's book, Bakhtiyar-er Ghora. Al-Mahmud cites and depicts that Bakhtiyar advanced so rapidly that only 18 horsemen from his army could keep up, and when they entered Bangladesh, they were mistaken for horse traders, allowing them to surprise the then Raja Lokhon Sen. Bakhtiyar was however killed in 1208, and a Turkish dynasty followed, during which Sonargaon was brought under Muslim rule in 1277. It was in 1576 that the Suri Empire, which included the Bangladesh region, was defeated and incorporated into the Mughal dynasty. History from then on is quite well kept, and we will not get into the details, as those are individually huge chapters. 1971 and a lot of other preceding events followed, and the rest is pretty much recent history. Our first major destination in Rajshahi division is the exquisite Kantaji's temple, but en route we decided to take a quick peek at the Ramsagar Dighi. While this looks just like a huge pool of water, this lake has quite a fascinating story behind it. After the rule of Aurangzeb, Raja Ramnath, who also finished the Kantaji's temple, was in charge of the Dinajpur district. At that time, the country was facing severe drought that claimed many lives. In search of water, the Raja employed a huge number of people to dig underground. The digging continued for 5 years, from 1750 to 1755 AD, but no water was found. According to legend, the Raja then saw a dream instructing him to sacrifice his only son, Prince Ram, to find water. In desperation to save his people, the king sacrificed his son, and the next day, water was found filling the entire hole that was dug. This water body, covering over 80 acres, was then named Ramsagar after Prince Ram.
This entire place was dug up by human labor. Now, isn't that amazing?
Ramsagar Dighi has been recently transformed into a commercial picnic and tourist spot, so it is now not only of historical importance, but a great place to relax and forget about the bustling city life. The Kantaji's temple is one of the most magnificent religious structures belonging to the 18th century. Raja Prananath started the construction of the temple during his reign, and the unfinished work was completed by his adopted son Raja Ramnath in 1752, according to a Sanskrit inscription in the northeast corner of the temple. Contains many terracotta plates of Radha Krishna celebrating eternal love. Secondly, the terracotta plates hold invaluable historic information ranging from the 10 incarnations of Vishnu to the social life of late medieval Bengal. Thirdly, the temple is still actively in use for practice. As the story goes, Raja Prananath had gotten into an enmity with his neighboring Jomidar, Raja Raghavendra Roy of Ghoraghat. Raja Raghavendra Roy falsely accused Raja Prananath of murdering his two brothers and for corruption and rebelliousness to the Mughal court. When Emperor Aurangzeb ordered Raja Prananath to appear at his court in Lahore, the Raja appeared with costly gifts and convinced the emperor of his innocence. In gratitude, Raja Prananath went to Vrindavan to honor his favorite god Krishna. In a dream, he saw he would find the image of Krishna in the morning on the bank of the Jamuna river. After much searching, he found the icon and in an ornamental boat set out to find a place to house the treasure. The boat stopped at Shamghar, 18 kilometers from the Raja's palace. Here the temple was built and the town renamed Kantanagar as it is till now. After 39 years of its hard labor, in 1752, the temple, almost 100 meters in height, stood as a magnificent 9-towered masterpiece with intricate and elaborate terracotta tiles covering the entire temple, each depicting individual scenes to tell us pictographic tales of the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, the exploits of Krishna, and of the landed aristocracy of the late medieval era of Bengal. Unfortunately, the 9 towers of the temple were destroyed in an earthquake in 1897 and never restored. The temple has been declared as a national monument in 1960, and since then, the Department of Archaeology has been performing the necessary conservation and restoration of the temple. As long as the government does not decide to repaint it, like Lalbagh or Asan Manjil, the temple will certainly retain its majesty. The magnificent and mysterious Paharpur is next on our list. This World Heritage Site, situated in Naugaon, holds the ruins of a vast Buddhist monastery, now called Sompur Mahavihar. It was built in the 8th century by Dharmapal, the second Pal emperor, and is the largest known Buddhist monastery south of the Himalayas. Paharpur is basically a city on its own, dotted with numerous structures such as monastic cells, stupas, gateways, minor chapels, and a number of wells. There are also ruins of a kitchen, dining hall, masonry drain, and a dominant central shrine. These rows of earth you can see are the tops of monastic cells. There are 177 in total and were built to accommodate monks, although
Afterwards, they were used for worship or meditation, since later more sculptures were put in these cells. The ruins of the central shrine are 21 meters high and covers 27 square kilometers and is eye-catching not only for its height, but for its unique structure as well. Its cruciform shape, 3 raised terraces, and complicated decorations on the walls make it an architectural wonder, similarities to which are quite unknown to the subcontinent. The shrine is decorated with more than 2,000 terracotta plaques created in the beautifully primitive Buddhist style. These are also unique to Bangladesh, from which the more complicated Hindu style of terracotta evolved. The basement wall used to be decorated with statues of Brahminical and Buddhist deities as well. Were found among the ruins, including more than 63 stone sculptures related to the Hindu faith, which indicates that a Hindu settlement probably existed here before the Buddhist Pal dynasty. Most of these can be seen in a museum near the entrance. Around the end of the 9th century, the monastery was damaged from attacks of foreign kings. When the Shen kings took control of Bengal in the 12th century, the Buddhist monastery became abandoned by its monks and worshippers. From then on, Paharpur remains deserted. Our next big destination is the oldest relic in Bangladesh, Mohastangor. But en route, we decided to take a very quick peek at the famous Afghan-built Kusumba Mosque. Built during the Afghan rule in Bengal, and dating back to 1558 AD, the entire Kusumba Mosque is made out of stone. Named after the village Kusumba, the walls are decorated with small water pots and rosette motifs. The mosque is separated into 2 portions, one with a raised platform ascended by a staircase where possibly the high-ranking officials used to pray. The mosque is preserved under the Department of Archaeology and is still being publicly used. Mohastangor, about 13 kilometers from Bogura, is probably the largest of all our sites. The city, now entirely in ruins, dates back to 700 BC and currently has 8 excavated sites, with 31 others left to be excavated. With civilizations repeatedly inhabiting this city, this place is literally a timeline of our history. Since most of the ruins pretty much look the same, we will be specifically looking at the tomb of Shah Sultan Maheswar, Jiyat Kundo, also called the Well of Life, the Govindo Bhita, Naropati Dhap or Bashu Bihar, and the famous Gokul Med, more commonly known as Behula's nuptial house. As mentioned earlier while narrating the historical timeline, Mohastangor used to be the capital of the Pundru kingdom and was known as Pundrunagar in 700 BC. There are also marks of Afghan settlements within Mohastan from during the beginning of Muslim rule in Bangladesh in the 12th century. The museum there wonderfully traces the different settlements of Mohastan, along with artifacts found in order to substantiate their existence. After the Pal dynasty, during the reign of Poshuram in the 12th century, Hinduism was the widespread religion of Mohastan, and the killing of cows was banned.
Evidently, as the story goes, there used to be a Muslim man named Burhanuddin. He did not have any children, and he prayed to God for a child, promising to sacrifice a cow for receiving such a blessing. Months later, he had a son, and keeping his word, he secretly sacrificed a cow. However, the locals saw the incident and reported it to the king. Poshuram called upon Burhanuddin, who refused to tell a lie. This made the bloodthirsty king furious, and he took away Burhanuddin's son and sacrificed him to the Hindu goddess Kali. During that, Islam was being preached in parts of Bengal, and Muslim rule was gradually taking over. Burhanuddin reclaimed his son's dead body and went to a Muslim council in Khulna, pleading for justice. Consequently, Shah Sultan was sent to Mohastan to preach Islam, and lore has it that he arrived via the river, riding a great fish, giving him the title Mahisawar. Thus, the battle began. It is at this point that the lore of Jiyat Kundo, also called the Well of Life, is first mentioned. Legend has it that King Poshuram resurrected his dead soldiers by throwing them into this well, out of which they would climb out alive. Sultan soon learned about this, and with the aid of a crow, he polluted the well by dropping a piece of beef into it. The well's waters then lost their power, and slowly the armies of Poshuram diminished, till Sultan defeated the king using his staff and chokro.
Mohastan was once protected by this enormous wall which used to be up to 14 feet high before it collapsed. Now, these are just the stubby remains.
Moving deeper into the ancient city lies the Gobindo Bhita. This supposedly housed a temple in tribute to Vishnu around the 3rd century BC. Situated right beside the Korotoya river, now, however, as you can see, there is not much left of it.
Doesn't look like much now, but this was once one of the greatest cities of Bengal, dating back to the pre-Mauryan era in 300 and 400 BC.
Bakshu Bihar or the Narupati Dhap also pretty much looks like an excavated site of mounds. However, there is more to this place than the Gobindo Bhita. Over 800 cultural objects, including bronze and stone statues, terracotta plaques, oil lamps, Brahmin inscriptions and others were found here, dating back to the 10th century. More importantly, this was also one of the oldest universities of Bengal. In case you are wondering, yes, this huge excavated mound is the nuptial house. Are you also wondering why anyone would want to spend their wedding night in a house like this? Well, the olden tales do answer that question. According to the story, Behula was a beautiful and intelligent woman married to Lokhindor, the youngest son of Chad Saudagar. Chad Saudagar boasted that he was cleverer and stronger than Monsha, the snake goddess. Monsha was extremely angered by this and slowly killed Saudagar's sons, one after another. In order to protect Lokhindor and Behula on their wedding night, he built a house which he believed to be impregnable. This house is the presently excavated site and has been named Behular Bashur Ghar, or her nuptial house. As the story continues, on their wedding night, Monsha sent a snake as fine as a strand of hair, which entered the chamber through a minute hole and bit Lokhindor. Ultimately, Behula was the one who went to Monsha and managed to save him. However, in order to do so, Saudagar had to bow down to the snake goddess. In this story, Behula personifies the strength and courage of a Bengali woman, as well as her love for her husband. It's been a long journey, and we have at last reached our final historical site, the mesmerizing village of Putia. The village of Putia is located right beside the Dhaka-Rajshahi highway, approximately 250 kilometers from Dhaka and 23 kilometers east of Rajshahi. Historically, Putia has the largest number of important Hindu structures built during the Mughal period in Bangladesh. Tradition has it that the first Raja of Putia, Nilambar, received his title from Emperor Jahangir at around the year 1620. In 1744, the land was eventually divided between four brothers, descendants of the Raja, and since then the numerous structures were built all over Putia. Interestingly, most of these structures were built by the queens, unlike most other sites. Currently, with 9 standing temples and 2 Rajbaris, Putia definitely traces back time and takes you on a trip to ancient Bengal. The first temple to come on site is the 5-spire ornate sheep temple built by Maharani Bhuban Mohini Devi in 1823 AD. The temple is decorated with stone carvings and sculptural works, which were unfortunately disfigured during the 1971 Liberation War, and also with numerous miniature ratnas or spires on the main tower as well as the 4 smaller ones. The Rath Mandir, located right beside the sheep temple, was also built at a similar time by the same Maharani. However, the architecture is very different, and it is one of the finest examples of a hut-shaped temple with a single tapering tower 33 feet high. Passing the sheep temple and just past another temple, commonly called Dol Moncho, lies the old dilapidated 2-storied Putia Rajbari. This grand palace was constructed by Rani Hemantu Kumari Devi in 1895 as inscribed on the palace. With the main pillars following interestingly Greek architecture, the Rajbari accommodates several large halls and a veranda 3.05 meters broad. While the palace, still in ruins, is the home to many birds, it is also being used as the Putia Degree College. Monuments is the 5-spire or Pancharatna Gobindo temple, built in 1616 AD by Raja Premo Narayan Rai, covered by incredibly intricate designs in terracotta plaques of burnt clay depicting scenes from Hindu epics. One may call it the brother of Kantaji's temple, as Raja Pranonath had built the Kantaji, being inspired from it. Inscription, the second Putia Rajbari was built in 1213 Bongabdo or 1806 AD, now completely in ruins. As the locals mentioned, the government never gave funds for the preservation of this Rajbari, abandoning this historical site which has completely collapsed and died over time. Other temples lie in similar conditions, the Choto Annika and Choto Sheep Temple. Both the temples are lined with numerous priceless terracotta plaques, many of which have been stolen or are in gradual disintegration. Unless the government notices these invaluable decaying relics and decides to preserve them, their traces will only remain in pictures and the pages of history. The final three temples of Puthia are the Boro Onnika, Choto Gobindo, and Gopal temples, existing together by a pond on the west side of the village. All three are under good preservation by the government and has been renovated several times. Raj estate survived till the abolition of the Jomidari system under the East Pakistan Estate Acquisition Act of 1950. Since then, the struggle for its preservation has begun. While the essence and beauty of the Raj estate can still be felt in Puthia, we plead the authorities to not ignore these historical relics and give them proper and adequate preservation. All in all, it was an exciting trip, and I'm sure the only thing that didn't enjoy it was the damsel in distress. We hope that we have helped you see our country in a new light, and you will pave your own way to these magnificent places. Good luck finding Bangladesh.